The Jets and Giants have a lot to do this offseason if they want to turn things around for next year. And right now, they're asking themselves, what are our best options? Joining me now is a guy who may have some of the answers, Geoff Magliochetti. Welcome back, my friend.
Mike, thank you for having me. Keep up the great work. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. I want to start with the biggest issue for the Jets. Aaron Rodgers is out as quarterback. I personally believe he's the biggest bust in New York sports history. How do the Jets navigate finding a replacement for Rodgers?
A little harsh, but I could see why. But the unfortunate thing about Aaron Rodgers at this point, I disagreed with the Jets' release of Rodgers because, in the grand scheme of things, he was almost the least of New York's problems at this point. Yes, he is not the Aaron Rodgers of the past. Yes, he does carry some sort of significant baggage. But the thing about Rodgers is he was adequate enough. And in this day and age of Jets football, that's pretty much all you need. And releasing Rodgers at this point, that more or less created an issue where there either was none or was fairly minimal. And the Jets are going into a point where the quarterback market is not as deep as you'd like to see it, especially when you're at this point on the franchise timeline. You're too deep in the draft to, go after the top prospects. The free agency market is a little thin. You know that you knew that was going to be the case when Matthew Stafford, a 36-year-old Matthew Stafford, was perhaps the top acquisition, and even that's not happening now that the Rams have agreed to a restructured contract. So, this was an interesting point. I do give credit to Aaron Glenn and Darren Muji going out there and kind of sending a message a little bit. The regime is over. This whole let's try to be the Packers thing. The Aaron Rodgers era is over. It's good to see them kind of admit defeat on that, not live with the mistakes of the past. But if you're the Jets at this point, you need any form of progress. And Aaron Rodgers could have given you that path. Now look, Rodgers is at a point where, that baggage should not be a deterrent to getting him back on the field, because he is at a point where unless he does something truly, truly, truly ridiculous, he's not going to gain or lose fans at this point. The jury is set on Rodgers. The court of public opinion has made its verdict on Rodgers. You either love the guy or you don't like the guy, with no in between. Nothing he can do can change anyone's minds. And all he can do right now is prove himself on the field, continue to work his legacy a little bit. Rodgers out there, again, he wasn't the greatest quarterback. He was nowhere near full strength in New York. But compared to what the Jets have had, this is a team whose best season under center came with Ryan Fitzpatrick in 2015, at least since, of course, the Joe Namath days, maybe the Ken O'Brien days. I'll even throw a few Chad Pennington days in there for you. The best statistical season with this group came with Ryan Fitzpatrick back in 2015. And unfortunately, that says more about the Jets' fortunes than it does the career of Ryan Fitzpatrick. So what the Jets did a little bit was create a need where there was none. Yes, it's probably good for morale. Yes, it's probably good for a franchise timeline. What do they say in every bad relationship? Move on. Don't text them back. Don't give them another call. Don't give them another thought. So it's good from a mental standpoint that the Jets did that, but unfortunately it happened to be the wrong place at the wrong time, in my opinion.
Now, another former Packer who landed with the Jets is wide receiver Davante Adams. The Jets are open to trading him prior to the season and will likely release him if they can't do that. How big of a problem will this be for them down the road?
I mean, when you're the Jets at this point, you're at a point where any setback is going to present a problem. But this is what happens when you go a decade plus in the modern NFL without reaching the playoffs. That's going to happen. Your mistakes are going to be amplified. And the Jets knew that they were in a bit of a pickle with Adams. They knew that they had to win immediately with Adams in the fold, because his contract was structured as such, where it was either you're going to have to win now, you're going to have to restructure it, or you're going to have to release him, because I believe he's due $70 million over the next 2 years on that contract that came over from Las Vegas. But no team is going to trade for that. No team is even going to give up meager assets for that. So it's looking more likely that the Jets are going to have to release him for nothing and eat the dead cap space. So it is going to be a problem for them moving forward. The Jets did set themselves up nicely, and this is like what you were saying, Mike, what made the Rodgers era so disappointing. What was the battle cry throughout the 2023 season? If only they had a quarterback. If only they had someone so averagely adequate. Let's see what happens. The Jets set them up in a very solid place with young talents galore, promising talents, guys who were in high character, guys who had high potential. And unfortunately, that did not come to fruition last season. And it's clear that Robert Saleh had run his course. I seen a lot of folks trying to write revisionist history on Robert Saleh after the way things fell apart after he left. Unfortunately, it seemed he was just not this job was not right for him. Again, wrong place, wrong time. They had gone as far as they could with Saleh, and it had to happen. Now again, it's time for a new era. It's time for a new regime. And unfortunately, it's going to come with some growing pains in the process, such as eating the financial penalties that the Adams seemingly inevitable release will incur. So, this is going to be a bit of a problem for the Jets. It will sideline them a little bit in the free agency proceedings. Fortunately, there seems to be just enough talent at the top of the receiver depth chart. That, of course, led by Garrett Wilson moving forward. So I think that there's a good chance that they can recover from this. There is the whoever does take center for the Jets next year, does have an immediate weapon to work with, but it does kind of sideline them for sure in the early stages of this latest rebuild phase.
Now, one of the biggest goals for the Giants this offseason, like the Jets, is finding a quarterback. The question is, what's their best approach? Because the draft gets tricky because the two teams picking before the Giants also need a quarterback. So do they trade? Do they find a free agent? What's the best option here?
Personally, I think, and this is going to ruffle some feathers, they should go after Aaron Rodgers, bring him on for maybe a year or two, work with and draft a quarterback. The way I see it, the best thing the Giants could do, it doesn't even have to be Rodgers. Bring in a veteran quarterback, have him mentor a young quarterback, a young guy. And the tragic thing about the Giants at this point is, there are so many holes on this team that the number 3 pick is not going to solve all of them, at least not immediately. You go draft a quarterback at this point. You basically resign yourself to another rebuilding campaign. You at least have to get into a point where I think we've discussed this before, Mike, especially in terms of the Jets. A realistic goal for each New York team at this point is show up in the hunt column by the end of the year on those playoff charts that they always put up at the end of the year. Those playoff charts says like division leaders, current wild cards, in the hunt. If you're in the hunt column by December, you can consider that a little bit of a successful season at this point. And the Mara family has made it clear that they're tired of losing. They're tired of looking at this. They're tired of being the new Cleveland Browns at this point. You can't endure another three-win season in New York for either side. And, it's tough at this point. We're getting to a point. We're not fully there yet, but we are dangerously close to a point where an entire generation does not know how proud and how dangerous a New York Giants squad can be. The last Super Bowl win looks like further and further a distant memory with each passing year, especially with each passing loss. Not just losses, but embarrassing losses in this process. So I think the Giants' best move would be to go after a veteran like an Aaron Rodgers and have him start for a year and draft a quarterback in the second and third round. There's some decent mid-round talents out there that I believe could make some noise. You got Will Howard out of Ohio State. You got Kyle McCord out of Syracuse. These are guys who can, really benefit from, a quote-unquote redshirt year. The same thing you did with Kurt Warner to Eli Manning in 2004. So I think that this could be the strategy worked once before. It could behoove them to employ this strategy again.
Yeah, it's not a bad idea. Now, the NFL Combine took place in Indianapolis last week. College players get invited every year to show off their talent. How much influence does the NFL Combine have in the decisions teams make in the offseason, and how will it affect the decisions of the Jets and Giants specifically?
I think it's very strong because, you are at a point where nothing has, demonstrated the stranglehold that football has on the American imagination more than two things: schedule release day and the NFL Combine. We go crazy to see these guys run around in shorts and t-shirts, run around and, raise or lower their draft stock. So it has gotten to a point where, careers can be won or lost over at the Combine. So it's very interesting to see. It's very interesting to see this evolution. And, it really shows the power that the NFL has in the American imagination. So interested to see. And, the Giants and Jets are really going to, put a lot of stock into this. Again, both sides are at points where they can't afford another 3-win season. This is why I've never advocated for the strategy of tanking because, the Jets and Giants, 3-win seasons, 4-win seasons, 5-win seasons, they're becoming mainstays in the top tens of the draft. And, the NFL draft is the biggest crapshoot in the history of mankind. How can you lose games on purpose and leave everything to chance like that? There's good talents out there. The Giants and Jets are at points where, even if you don't make the playoffs, you need to get, 6 or 7 win seasons out there. You need to linger. So they're looking for immediate impact players, and the combine could be a great place to find that. So I think they're really doing their due diligence. They're really going to look for strong athletes in there, and they're going to press forward for guys who can make immediate impacts in their respective new locales.
And finally, Geoff, I want to quickly switch to baseball. This offseason, the New York Yankees reversed a long-implemented rule that didn't allow the players to wear facial hair beyond a well-groomed mustache. The new rule allows them to wear nothing more than a well-groomed beard. Now, the Yankees have always been known for their class and character. Does the team start to lose its identity with a rule like this, or is this a good thing that the Yankees are now getting with the times?
I mean, you could go either way on that, I feel. Personally, I was in the minority on this. I was a fan of the facial hair rule, partially because my high school, my all boys Catholic school, more or less did the same thing. Shout out Don Bosco Prep, go Ironman. But I think that there was a bit of a charm to it in the sense that it was play good baseball, look good doing it. And when you're in a position the Yankees have been in, you kind of do have to shake things up a little bit. There is a point where we Yankee fans are indeed spoiled. We look at seasons that someone in, say, Pittsburgh would give their left arm for, and we view it as a disappointment. You think someone in root for the Miami Marlins, they'd sell their soul for a season like the one the Yankees had last year, and we're walking around calling it disappointing. We're walking around calling, oh, that was disgusting. Let's never do that again. But we're at a point where the title drought again to talk to the Giants to bring up like the Giants perspective. It's going to be now 16 years I believe since they last triumphed in the World Series back in '09 against Philadelphia. So I think you kind of do have to shake things up a little bit. You kind of do. I don't want to say it's incentive, but it's nice to see that they're kind of they recognize maybe not a real issue, but they recognize maybe that is keeping them in the past a little bit. And I think it's also a case of self-reflection too. If you're going to have rules like that, you need to be a perennial contender. You need to be, winning World Series year after year, because that way, when you do have rules like that, you could say, it's working, isn't it? But the lack of World Series titles shows that maybe it wasn't working. And now that's obviously not the entire. That's not the Yankees weren't losing World Series because Johnny Damon couldn't have a long beard. That's not the case by any stretch of the imagination. That's not the primary culprit. But again, it is kind of a self-reflection at this point, as if to say, like you can't say it's working, so let's keep it up. It's not working at this point. So again, if they wind up winning it all this year, I wouldn't be surprised to see them come in like ZZ Top in 2026. So I'm eager to see what happens. Frankly, I think the better change for New York, the more impactful change for New York. I'm very glad they're not playing Sinatra after losses anymore. I think that's a step in the right direction. I think so many times last year, for example, I'm like, this team is so not worthy of a Sinatra serenade. And besides, that's life is right there. So I think that's going to be the more impactful change. Eager to see where it leads, though.
That's a fantastic outlook. Geoff Magliochetti, sports guru, thanks as always for all the insight.